Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Public Works Committee meeting. Ms. Kern, roll call, please.
Roll call, Councilmember Thomas,
Present.
Councilmember Jeruso. Councilmember Harris. Councilmember King, Councilmember Green. We have a quorum.
First, approval of the minutes from the August 30th meeting. So move. Second by Councilmember Harris. All in favor? Ayes have it, so ordered. Item number 3, Ms. Kern.
We have motion number 23-457 by Council Members King and Harris. The motion authorizing the president of the council to sign the Fifth Amendment to the bid contract between the city and Keller Meyer Bergeson Services for the purpose of extending the duration of an additional 1 year from December 23rd, 2023 through December 22nd, 2024, increasing the maximum aggregate amount payable to the city, by the city to an amount not to exceed $39,382,193.
And we have, we have 2 amendments. Amendment and a motion.
We can't vote on them. We don't have a quorum. Okay.
Councilmember Harris.
So this is a by request, and as Councilmember Jeruso is saying, we cannot vote on an amendment during a committee meeting. Is that correct, Anita? Yeah, correct. Okay.
Information purposes only.
Yeah, so again, this is a by request extension of a contract between the city and Keller Meyer Bergeson Services. Should we just go ahead and take this up in the full council meeting?
Yeah, we just move it towards the full body.
Okay. Yeah, either way, it has to be approved by the full council. It's just a matter if it's approved at committee, it can go on the consent agenda. Let's go ahead and take it up at the full council since there are amendments.
Moved by Councilmember Harris, second by the chair. All in favor?
Aye.
The item is moved to the full council. Next item on the agenda, Ms. Kern.
We have a presentation from the Ground Transportation Bureau, a discussion and update on chapter 162 relating to CPNC's renewal and reinstatement. We have Sarah Porteous.
Ms. Proteus, introduce yourself and start your presentation, please.
Good morning, Sarah
Good morning.
McLaughlin Porteous, Acting Director for the Department of Public Works.
And do my colleagues have some information? I think Tara sent around some information updates on this particular item. So you should have it as part of your packet. And if you don't, let me know, please. Ms. Proteus.
Yeah, I would just, a couple things to get started. Obviously, you know, the Ground Transportation Bureau came to the Department of Public Works several years ago. They continue to operate, you know, with inadequate staffing.
What is several?
I'm sorry?
How many years is several?
I think in 2020.
Okay.
Came down to the Department of Public Works. So they're continuing to operate, you know, with inadequate staffing, you know, particularly on the enforcement side. Also, I would say in the office, you know, to be able to, you know, process all of the applications that come in. I'm going to share with you some numbers because I want to be very transparent about where ground transportation is with its backlog. Right now, the total number in their backlog is 1,134. As it relates to reinstatement.
Backlog of 1,134.
1,134. That's the backlog. And so that's not just taxi cabs, that's, you know, school buses, drivers, tour. I mean, that's really everything in the for-hire industry. It's transportation as a whole. In terms of reinstatements, because I know that's a request that came in for your office, and we are trying to track those separately just so we're aware. So as of yesterday afternoon, we ran a report and we have 75 requests for reinstatement. 55 of them are for school buses, 14 for taxi cabs, 5 for sightseeing, and 1 for limousine. So, and in terms of pedicab applications, I know this is another thing of interest to your office for CPNC numbers. We have 1 request from a DBE, which we have verified as a DBE, requesting 15 numbers. 1 registered DBE, again verified, requesting 5 numbers. 1 non-registered DBE, but states that they qualify, requesting 15 numbers, and then another non-registered requesting 15 numbers. So again, you know, part of the reason why we have these challenges with the Ground Transportation Bureau, and I want to be totally transparent about that. I think
you're always transparent.
I know, but I guess it's Sarah Unplugged on my last.
Oh, okay. Oh.
This is her last day.
Wait, this is your last meeting?
This is her last.
In the spirit of the last year and 9 months, let's go at it.
Let's go at it. Let's go at it. I think, lack of leadership and an administrator. This division has been without an administrator for a couple of years. Part of the reason is not having somebody who qualifies. The eligibility requirements requires for higher experience. So for a while, we didn't have anybody who qualified. The salary wasn't competitive. We did go through a process where we worked with civil service to try to increase the salary for both the administrator and assistant administrator, and that's going to come up to you all for approval in the next council meeting, and I certainly hope you will support that because it's really needed. The good news is we do finally have somebody who is qualified. Obviously, I wish there were a whole slew of people so we could make sure to pick the best person, but I think lack of consistent leadership has been a real challenge. The other challenge is that because of that, we haven't been able to do a market study. The CPNC, the Certificate of Public Necessity licenses, it's a necessity. And without understanding what the market really needs, we're continuing to issue new CPNC numbers, but we're doing it without the data to support it. So I think that market study is absolutely critical. It's going to be a critical piece for whomever comes in that administrator role.
Most of America's cities are a bit challenged with that
Yeah.
right now, but many are ahead of us
Mhm.
in figuring out the industry and where it's going to settle.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be a really important piece going forward. I mean, I will tell you, you've got a dedicated team of people in the Ground Transportation Bureau. We have doubled the office staff, so there are 4 people in there now. We've added a couple new investigators on the inspection side. But I think, they're limited in terms of the amount of enforcement they can do out in the field, and that's a critical piece of this, So I think we need to continue to build the investigative staff. The other challenge, you're probably aware that the city took over inspection of school buses without additional staffing. I mean, that's a significant undertaking. And that has just sort of exacerbated the backlog issue that was existing. I mean, there are a lot of things underway to try to improve things. I think we are working with ITI to see if we can bring the application process back online, at least a portion of that. That's going to help. The other challenge is that there's a lot of, when somebody submits an application, whether it's for reinstatement, for whatever it is, there's a lot of back and forth with the office staff. Sometimes they submit things with an incomplete application. It doesn't have all of the information that's required. And then you're waiting on that applicant to get back to you with that information. And that remains in the queue, which continues to grow. So, I wish I could give you a better picture. I think I would say DPW has done its best to support Ground Transportation Bureau. I think my ultimate recommendation is it probably does need to live, somewhere else, maybe in the New Orleans Police Department where it was originally. I think that will give them more enforcement powers. But
Well, let
where we
me say this. This is the Public Works Committee. And, everybody always reminds me that I've been around a while.
Yeah.
Not continuously elected, because there's some people who have actually been elected or in office longer than me. It's just that I span Councilman Giarrusso a couple of decades of being elected and then being elected again. I don't know how this got into the Public Works Committee. I don't know why this is part of Public Works Committee, because it's a transportation issue. But, I'm going to say it. This is an example of how when an important issue becomes a political football, when political people don't want to deal with stuff that could be hot item issues or issues of public importance that we haven't figured out yet. And so some council took an issue that had always been transportation, that is still transportation, and put it with roads and sanitation and infrastructure. Why they did it, I don't know. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit. But there's so many things that don't fit in this city that politicians complain about and blame about. But this could have been dealt with in the right committee with the right professionals a long time ago. And for the public out there, we have a transportation issue that a council transferred to the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. I don't know why, if the news wanted to pick something up, maybe that wasn't sexy enough. But why this transportation issue would be in a committee that doesn't fit it, never fit it, Rob, you've been around. I wish I knew. So hopefully we can find a rightful place. And let me say this, guess I'm brave enough and stupid enough and been around long enough that if we can't find a rightful place, we'll make it the rightful place here. But it doesn't fit with this committee.
Can I ask,
Councilmember Jerusalem.
thank you. There's been just so much, this is now Joe Unplugged, Sarah. Like you know, from Ida and COVID, I can't remember the pace of things. So was this a council-led initiative or was this an administrative-led one? And I guess that's one.
Good question.
And then two is, either case, to Councilmember Thomas's point, where is the best place for this to live? Because if we have to take action and put it somewhere else, then let's do it and make it work better.
Yeah, I don't know all the history.
Yeah.
I was in a different role, so I don't want to comment on that
Hmm.
without knowing fully.
Right.
Certainly can look into it. My personal opinion, and I've spent a lot of time with the staff, and like I said, we really, you should know, and I'd just be remiss if I didn't say this again. I mean, you have some incredible staff.
That's fully transparent time, so you can do it.
Yeah, but
Right.
great staff in there. I mean, they're all dedicated. They all want to make things work, but they're frustrated because I think it doesn't feel like they've been set up for success. You know, in meeting with them, they would like to be part of NOPD. That's where they were. I don't know what led to that transition, you know, a couple decades ago, but that's where they were. I think it would give the enforcement officers more enforcement power to actually make a difference out there. So, you know, I take what they have recommended to heart, and that's where they, I think, ultimately want to be.
I mean, I think I'm happy
Great
to work.
question.
No, I think like we ought to work on that. And if there's any, barring any legal reason that we shouldn't do it, then let's just go make it happen.
It makes sense, especially if you're gonna talk about enforcement and the ability to have enforcement out there on the ground, so.
Yeah,
Uh,
Councilmember Thomas, if I
So you,
could,
you're maybe your last meeting, but you're fixing stuff.
right, well, I think this is a transition meeting too.
Yeah.
So I think she's transitioning to me.
Yes,
That's why I'm here. But I believe that
solution.
until something else happens on a transfer, I mean, support for staffing up the organization, you know, to do a better job and process permits, you know, is as long as it's in DPW, we're gonna strive to bring it up to acceptable levels.
All right, well, is 4 the right number to deal with the 1,134 backlog items?
No, certainly not. I mean, and I would say, you know, the investigator staff, they have been working some overtime hours to try to help get through them, but I don't know what the magic number is. I mean, I think the first step is approving these salary adjustments for the administrator and assistant administrator. Again, I don't remember the date, but it's going to come up for your approval in a council meeting in October. Getting some leadership in there to help really get some good answers to that question. Exactly what is needed to be able to manage that organization effectively and get back to a point where the people in there feel like they're succeeding. And obviously we're serving the people who need their licenses to operate their businesses, you know, more quickly.
Well, we've been activists, and I know all of us have been meeting with the staff, trying to find a place, trying to figure out where the industry settles. And I think it makes sense for the people in the industry, especially given how uncertain these times are and how there's so many changes in transportation. Council members Harris and Jeruso, that I think it's the perfect time to try to find the right place in space, especially moving forward, because the one thing I do when I travel is I talk to CNPC holders. I ask them about their industry. I ask other city officials how they deal with it. And no one has answered all the questions yet because it's still changing.
Yeah, and I think if there are specific markets that you're familiar with that, you know, because I want to leave some direction for whomever comes in as the administrator that you think that we should look at, please let me know.
Will do. Anything else on this item?
No.
Council members, anything else on this item?
Good luck, Sarah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's good.
Thank you so
It
much.
should be good luck, Joe.
No.
Pray for you all the time.
Well, you're a disaster guy, right? And the good thing about what Ms. Proteus left you is a level of organization and competence. And one of the things I liked and disliked about Ms. Proteus is that the answering of emails all night and all hours of the morning And those conversations she would weave us into because she was responding to constituents. I think it's supposed to be like that. And you know, no one wants a charter lesson on rules and responsibilities, but the council isn't the administration. We are the legislative branch of government. Our charter role is budgeting, appropriation, public policy, zoning, and land use. We get involved in its administrative functions because our constituents expect us to. So when you have a director or when you have administrative officials who are engaged daily and directly, it actually fits what the charter says our roles are supposed to be. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember, I have one online comment.
Yes, yes.
This is from Wesley Pfeiffer. He says, I represent 21 companies encompassing over 400 CPNCs. There's no reason why the Ground Transportation Bureau office should have such a large backlog for permit processing. Historically, most permits were issued the same day. The staffing level is not at an historic low. The office should reopen to the public in addition to enabling renewals to be submitted online via the One Stop app. The framework was programmed in 2020 for online renewals and staff were trained to do online processing. Nearly every other permit or license in the city can be renewed online and there's no reason why GTB shouldn't follow suit. I have offered assistance to the GTB staff to provide any assistance they may require to accomplish online renewals and code changes, but have been met with resistance and stonewalling. I believe the staff are well-trained and are capable of success.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment.
One other thing I will just add,
Get it all in then.
all in.
Get it all in. This is your last meeting, right?
It is my last meeting.
Yeah.
So the Ground Transportation Bureau will be moving up into the 7th floor.
Okay.
Once that renovation is complete. So we will have, you know, an open setting for people to actually come in.
Thank you. Progress. Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Thank you, Mr. Threat. Next item on the agenda, please.
Next item is presentation from Sewage and Water Board with an update regarding the saltwater intrusion.
And I think we have some members of the Corps here, or are they gonna report with Homeland Security? You guys figure out who, how, and where and why. Councilmember Jeruso, the saltwater is coming. Long live fresh water. Kids are gonna be dressed as saltwater for Halloween. Yeah, Councilmember Harris.
The administration is asking us to reconsider motion number M23-457. The amendment isn't an actual amendment, it's an amendment to a contract. So can we move to reconsider?
Yeah, absolutely. I move to reconsider the motion.
Second,
Motion 23, second by Councilmember Harris. All in favor?
aye.
Ayes. Councilman, you want to move?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and move.
Seconded by the chair. All in favor of moving on the motion?
Aye,
Ayes have it, so ordered.
and it'll go on the consent agenda. Thank you.
You see the favor we just did?
So nice.
Chalk it up. Mr. Spooner, Colonel, Mr. Nelson, you guys can start your report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and as well as the other Public Works members. One, we're here to give a briefing with Sewage and Water Board, and also like to thank our partners at the table, the Corps of Engineers, as well as NOSEP, Colin Arnold. We're here to give an update where we are from sewage and water perspective, but as also a regional perspective on the saltwater intrusion. Again, as I said, we are partners here, and the Corps will give a presentation. I mean, Sewage and Water will give a presentation. The Corps is here to answer any questions on their end. Again, I just first want to start off that the salt water, again, has not reached the New Orleans area. And our water in New Orleans Parish,
Say that again, please.
the salt water has not reached New Orleans. We'll go into detail on that, but very good media coverage from all the media stations and radio stations on salt water. So it has not reached the New Orleans area. The water in New Orleans Parish, we want to stress, remains safe to drink and use for all purposes. So we want to stress that also. But more importantly, let me squeeze out of the way a little bit, is that this is a regional issue that requires regional cooperation. And this regional cooperation has been ongoing for the last since Sewage and Water Board been involved, 2.5 to 3 weeks, working with all 4 parishes working together, Orleans, Jefferson, St. Bernard, and Plaquemines, as well as at the state and the federal level. So again, it's a regional issue that requires regional solutions, and we are working every day as a regional team to address this issue. Looking at the slide, what is it? And and I would say, just stop anytime if there are any questions for the Sewage and Water Board or the Corps, NOSEP, and we hear the answer. So does everyone know what is it? It's drought conditions. The Mississippi River Valley has been experiencing droughts the last year and a half, which resulted in low Mississippi River levels. So again, when you have those low flows, that allows the salt water to creep up the river, and that's what's happening now. On that slide, you see the location of the sill, and just graphically salt water flow to the freshwater flow. All of this has been on the media. Next slide, and you'll see the underwater sill. This is a depiction of the Corps of Engineers underwater sill. This is at river mile 63.7 ahead of passes. That sill has been in place since midsummer. I'll ask the Corps to comment. I don't know the exact date.
No, appreciate it. We were able to identify the trigger point to actually establish the saltwater sill in late June. And when you have that understanding, as you heard from Ron, when the flows on the Mississippi get below 300,000 cubic feet per second, that enables the Gulf of Mexico to start projecting up the Mississippi River. So based off of that trigger point, we began construction of the underwater sill. And to give you an idea of that, that's like an underwater levee. We built it up to a height of -55 to give a speed bump in the river. And it's been operating as designed. But, you know, in early September, we saw a drop in the forecast and the flows on the Mississippi River continuing to go down to historic levels. To give you some context, right now, the Mississippi River is flowing at 150,000 cubic feet per second. So half of what we need to keep the salt water from intruding. So based off of that, last Wednesday, the sill currently as designed was overtopped. Thankfully, because we identified this in early September based off the National Weather Service forecast, we were able to quickly execute contracting and get a dredge out on site. We started construction this Sunday to augment the sill. We're going to add another 25 feet to the left and right sides of the sill while maintaining a 620-foot notch so that we can maintain navigation during harvest season as a part of in support of our national economy. That's going to buy us another 10 to 15 days before we see the salt water continuing to intrude up. I can tell you right now, the saltwater toe is currently located just upriver of the saltwater sill at river mile 69.4. It's hit a low point in the river.
In terms of geography, where that is, where is that? You gave a point in terms of dealing with your map, but for people who are listening, that means it's where? Empire, Venice, Southwest Pass?
We actually pull the graphic up, sir, and looking at that graphic just south of the Naval Air Station.
No, yeah, that's correct. You know, just south of the Belle Chase Naval Reserve Base.
All right.
And then as such, that gives us time and space working with the parishes as a part of both the parish and state and federal response so that we can ensure that we can mitigate the impacts of the saltwater intrusion. We're going to see construction at the sill for about the next 24 days. And then once complete, we're going to maintain that speed bump to continue to limit progression upriver. But eventually, given a long enough timeline and the current forecast, it will be overtopped.
Councilmember Jerusalem.
Yeah, good morning. As I told Colin and Anna the other day, this is like my third once in a lifetime event in 3 years. So, you know, it's just, I think we're trying to prepare all New Orleanians for what's going to happen and balancing reality with also sanity at the same time. I think it's really important to do that. And I appreciate the level everybody at that table has gone to. I guess my first question is, this is the first year since 1988 this has happened. Is that right? No, was there another event in 2012 that was similar?
Correct. We've seen it on, typically it's been on a 10-year process, but just recently we saw it in 1988, then we saw it in 2012. We saw it in 2022. It didn't get as far up there. And then 8 months later, we were hitting our trigger points again. So we're seeing increased frequency of drought conditions that exacerbate this event.
So recognizing climate change, drought conditions, all of these things that are happening that we have to deal with. Are we going to take some additional proactive steps? And let me just say this, like, to me, the nuclear option is just closing off the river and saying we're protecting New Orleans. Of course, then that hurts the national economy as a result. So the regional area is going to suffer as a result of that. What other steps can be taken? I mean, are there places, for example, if they use 10% less water, then we get affected better? I mean, again, this is a local issue in the sense of it's affecting New Orleans, and Jefferson Parish, and Plaquemine and St. Bernard, but it's a national issue in the sense of if everybody does their part, we can maybe get through this a little bit more easily. Is that right?
No, I appreciate the question. I think the key thing that will fix this in the long run is getting sufficient rain within the Mississippi Valley. To give you an idea, it would require about 10 inches across the entire Mississippi Valley for us to get flows above 300,000 feet per second. To your first question, what else can we be doing? Right now, I can tell you saltwater intrusion is a significant component in the area that we're looking currently within the Lower Mississippi River Comprehensive Study, which we have kicked off this summer, which is a 5-year, $25 million study that goes from Cape Girardeau, Missouri, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, with the goal of determining actionable recommendations. As such, just given the increased frequency of saltwater intrusion and the significant impacts that we see to the region, what can we do both at the federal, state, and parish levels to reduce this and increase water security for the region?
Yeah, I mean, again, though, like, we're all praying for rain, each of us, but we can't guarantee that's going to happen. So, I mean, do we need to do more of these sills in different places along the Mississippi in order to help what's going to happen? And turning back to, if other places along the river use less water, would that help this region too?
Just given in regards to municipal water use, looking at what we're taking out of the river on order of scale, it's not significant in regards. It is the massive amount of water that we need to go in. To your other question, the Corps has looked at augmenting with additional sills, and unfortunately, it's a time game. The ability for us to construct one sill, the original one took about 24 days within June and July to establish. We're adding additional height here. When we went through and identified this as a potential condition in early September, we went through and looked at the entire gambit.
Right.
And at the end, we found that the option that gave us the most benefit, while the least impact to navigation in the most timely fashion that gave us the most time, was augmenting at the sill.
Right. Okay. But I guess like 1988, 2012, 2022, 2023, if we've been very, I think as a group to council, that's the point Councilmember Thomas, I think, has tried to make this morning, is that we actually work with our partners better than sometimes is portrayed. We have no problem going to talk to the senators, the Congress people, and saying, we need your help. So if we're going to go say to them, we need your help, what do we need to ask for to try and mitigate this from the beginning in Ohio all the way down here to Louisiana?
I think barring in, the rain that we're asking for, that's probably not going to happen, or will happen eventually. The tactic, the strategy that we're taking right now is drawing water further upriver. And I think that's going to be the focus of this event and then moving forward. We had a call yesterday with FEMA Region 6, Administrator Robinson. Very engaged. They understand. They have received the governor's application for the federal declaration, not seeing any issues with that. They are activating their federal response team in the event of a federal shutdown, which is a whole other issue that's going on right now. So we're not anticipating any issue there. GOSEP is aligned. The state and the governor are aligned with us on this project that Sewage and Water Board has begun the engineering on, which is to create about 10 to 12 miles of piping that is going to go upriver. It's going to draw from north of Kenner. It will address both the city of New Orleans East Bank Carrollton Water Plant and Jefferson Parish East Bank Water Plant, which are the two largest draws in this region and are large enough that the barging and blending of water and the reverse osmosis machines that are going to work in other communities downriver that are smaller intakes, they're not going to work for Carrollton Water Plant or for East Bank Jefferson. And so having this ability to build pipe within the next month upriver, drawing water from there. After this will be temporary for now, but what we're understanding, and I'm sure Ron's going to go over it a little more, is that once this is over this year, with some effort, we can make this permanent. And so we would have water draw from further upriver.
And that would be enough water for New Orleans and Jefferson Parish.
East Bank Jefferson Parish, yes, sir.
Okay.
And I think we're going to go over that.
And look, the reason why I'm asking all these questions is it's important, and B, like, again, we have conversations all the time about budgeting for impact. This is the impact. And so
Yeah,
we've got to be ready.
Colonel Jones can attest. We've asked about more sills, closing off the river, anything we can do to prevent this from moving up the river. I think what they're doing with the sill is giving us that time to come up with a more unique solution to this that will be potentially permanent.
And Colin, to put a fine point on it, do we think raising the sill to the level as described by the Colonel will give Sewage and Water Board enough time to do the piping upriver as the temporary mechanism?
Every day we're not building pipe is a lost day in that regard, but I think that within a 28-day to 45-day, we can.
Okay.
Which we may have some issues from this, particularly on the West Bank, which is a different solution. That's going to be the water barging, but the time should work out pretty closely.
And then just sort of to again tie this up, like as goes Orleans, so goes Jefferson. I assume we're partnering together on all of this.
100%. And really, as much as we say, you know, we're in this together as a region during hurricanes, we are. Everyone has their own unique challenges. This has been probably the biggest mobilization I've seen of everyone as a region understanding that this is, we're not getting out of this. There's no one is going to be unaffected by this in some form or fashion.
Well, and Colin, and just to close out, Mr. Chair, I think that's sort of the issue right now is people have a framework for hurricanes, category 5, I'm leaving town, tropical depression, I'm staying, we know I'm in a cone of uncertainty. So it's trying again to manage the anxiety of the unknown with the plan of what's happening.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Harris.
Yeah, Colonel, you talked about this comprehensive study. What is the timing on the comprehensive study to be finished so that we are prepared for the future? Because this is going to happen again.
So, ma'am, it's a 5-year study, so we just kicked it off in June. So within 5 years, we'll be presenting this to the chief of engineers with our actionable recommendations. You know, the critical aspects that we're looking at as a part of that study, going from the lower part of the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico, is, you know, navigation, flood risk mitigation, coastal storm resiliency, ecosystem restoration, and one of the key authorized purposes is municipal water use and supply, and then how we can potentially look at increasing water security in areas that are vulnerable to saltwater intrusion, such as this area that we're experiencing right now.
Okay, and Ron, and Colin, you talked about the pipe. Has that construction started, or are we still at pre-construction?
It has not started. I'll let Ron, you
We
want
can
to?
answer that. Actually, I'll ask Grace to skip to the regional slide. Just want to show from a regional perspective, go back to. Again, and then what's on the screen now, when we say a regional impact, the dots you see are just the Sewage and Water Board intakes on the East Bank and the Sewage and Water Board on the West Bank. The 3 or 4 dots that are not on there are the West Bank or the intake facilities for Gretna, West Wego, and West Jefferson on the West Bank. They're not shown. So again, it's the regional effort of which we want to talk about. So again, going to the next slide, we'll.
Wait, but you didn't answer my question. So when will construction on the pipe begin? Or were you about to answer the question?
That's our next presentation, ma'am.
Okay,
So, and what we're going to do now, we're going to turn it over to Steve Nelson, just to let the committee know and the public know, as Colin indicated, we're in recon mode. We're looking at all options to mitigate this issue. We've narrowed down to several other options. The piping is one that we talked about quite a bit. Steve's going to talk about potential vessels, but why I'm saying this is a regional effort, state, local, and federal level, because the more we look into it, the magnitude of the solutions is quite expensive. We just don't want to downplay that. This is a very expensive proposition, without a doubt. Probably one of the most expensive propositions we've done in a long time. So again, we'll go into that. And from a regional perspective, that's why we're working together.
Okay, and
What these costs are, and I'll turn it over, ma'am, to, one question.
yeah, before Steve starts, and definitely want to hear about the construction. Is there anything that we should be doing now as a community, as a region, for example, not turning on sprinklers, conserving
say-
water?
At this point in time, ma'am, everyone should remain calm.
Yep.
In Orleans Parish and Jefferson, the wedge is not up. It's operation as usual. But we are bringing the message out to the people what potentially may happen if the salt water continues to move up past Belle Chase water treatment into the larger metropolitan areas of Orleans and Jefferson. It's just to be prepared, just like we're preparing for a hurricane. Right now, it's new for me, is we are preparing for impact to the potable water system.
And have you looked at the past years, the incidents in 1988, 2012, 2022, to determine the best course of action and when we need to act as far as conservation of water? You're shaking your heads.
Yes, we have, and it's ongoing now. That past history is really key. We've submitted whatever past history and records we have to our regional partners so they can analyze that data also.
Okay,
I would add though, 1988 is about the closest that we've had to New Orleans being and Jefferson Parish being affected by this. And we did not see that. So there is an unknown to this as far as where we are as the two largest water producing municipalities in this region. And that's why, you know, we did have to go to the drawing board with this pipeline solution, looking at kind of just the sheer capacity of Carrollton Water Plant. You know, we realized quickly that barges were not going to be able to do that.
And before Mr. Nelson starts, credit to Councilmember Jeruso and Harris, have some sharp colleagues. This isn't a new issue. If you're an outdoorsman or a fisherman, when you talk about diversion, saltwater intrusion, if you're someone who spends some time on a boat outdoors, you can go down the Southwest Pass and you can see where the saltwater is pushing against the fresh water. And also, Councilman Jeruso, when you started your questioning, all we want to know from Sewage and Water Board is, can we flush our toilets? And when the water collects, will it drain out, right? And can we drink it until we can't drink it anymore? But based on you guys questioning and focus, the real issue is here with Homeland Security and the Colonel. This is an issue that people who studied our natural topography and our land and our region have had some concern about for a long time, Councilmember Jeruso. Sally Ann Glassman, Press Capital's wife, have held her conferences on water for several years, where experts have talked about the routing of the river, where it meets the Gulf, sediment buildup, natural diversion projects. Are we doing enough? Because if you would talk to those people, at some point, they would say, at some point, the chickens are gonna come home to roost, and we can't keep creating these underwater levees. Something more permanent has to be done, especially if you get that ground zero event, right? And the Colonel will tell you, they said the British are coming, they're coming, but they weren't there until they were. So I actually think you guys focused on the meat of this discussion. It's how do we deal with this long term? How is our locking system and levee system and diversion system? How does it deal with this long term? Because it's not gonna stop, especially given the effect of the weather, climate change, sea level rising, what happens in the Antarctic and the North Pole. this is, you were aware, Councilmember Harris, the conversation really needed to be. So, Mr. Nelson, if you don't mind for a few seconds, how close are we, Colonel? And you know, as a military man, you guys forecast. As a leader of the Corps, you know more about our systems and water systems and levee systems than most people. Those conversations about the river and how do we route it, protect it, and our diversion, are we there now? With this event and how real and urgent this event is, are we there at that discussion right now?
Councilman,
Or have we always been?
Once again, I appreciate the question. I can tell you that conversation has been ongoing for a significant period of time, and this event just puts another point of poignancy on it and our ability to continue to push forward through the Lower Mississippi River Comprehensive Study to be able to have an opportunity to focus on it and provide actionable recommendations through a significant element. I've got an entire team of hydrologists that are looking at the entire lower stem of the river, but to be able to have a good focus at that point to provide additional thoughts. At the same time, there's also opportunities based off of the event to have a significant spin-off study to see if there are significant structural or non-structural or nature-based solutions that can be applied to prevent this from happening in the future now that we've identified and seen that it is a possibility.
And then lastly, calling Mr. Homeland Security. How far are we out from doomsday, if there is a doomsday? And if that time comes, what would the government in our city need to do to protect our citizens from this unnatural event?
Are you asking about this incident in particular? or-
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
I
the
don't
only
think-
reason I'm asking because there's been panic created. The people on social media are fighting, and that's why I think what Councilmember Druso and Harris did was so important. We just want to know from the Sewage and Water Board, how long can we drink our water? And when do we have to stop? Period, right? But from you guys, in terms of national interests, right? Homeland security, sense of urgency, the panic's already been created already. Mr. Arnold,
I don't think
how long we got?
we're not in a doomsday situation
Okay, thank you.
by any means.
It was important to get that on the table.
Yeah.
Back to you, Mr. Spooner and Mr. Nelson.
Ms. Thomas, he's exactly right. We're not in a doomsday situation. So our partners in Lower Plaquemines, as they've said, been dealing with this since June. And also since last year, and they've dealt with it. So second part of the presentation, what we're going to do is with Steve Nelson, we're going to talk about some of our options that we've been discussing and exploring with our regional partners, as well as on the local, state, and federal level. And I'll turn it over to Steve.
Yeah, thank you very much. Steve Nelson, Deputy General Superintendent of Engineering and Services. As a number of folks have mentioned, the ultimate solution in this situation, which is for myself and my family, we're praying it rains on Ohio.
Yeah.
But the blessing and the good news is we have a number of other options at our disposal to mitigate this issue. And I'm going to talk about those today. I wanted to really make sure that there's an unequivocal thanks to our local, state, and federal partners, all of which have done everything possible that we have asked. They have been involved in every discussion we've had with a positive attitude, leaning forward. And as the governor stated on Friday, go big, go fast. And if we need to scale back later, that's what we'll do. And we have seen that at every level: FEMA, Army Corps, state, and then our parish partners who are in this with us together. So a huge thanks to all of those folks. I did also want to mention there's been discussions about future planning. Ghassan has had this in his front of mind for a number of years, and there is an RFP right now for water quality master plan that will involve discussions and investigation on issues related to saltwater intrusion, but the effects of climate change in general, because this may not be the only issue that we face. We want to be able to plan for multiple different scenarios. And that should be completed within the next 18 to 24 months, in case there's a question on that time frame. I did want to mention the projection, the saltwater wedge. When you see the toe of the wedge, that's saltwater levels at the bottom of the river, and then it's essentially a triangle that rises as it passes. The prediction is that the toe of the wedge is roughly 15 miles upstream of where you see surface salinities.
which is in general when we expect to see those chloride levels of 250 milligrams per liter or higher. It is predicted, as the Corps indicated last week, that those surface salinities of 250 milligrams per liter should reach our West Bank intakes on or about October 22nd, and our Carrollton East Bank intakes on or about October 28th. So those are kind of the key timeframes that we're looking to have mitigation strategies in place, and we're going to talk about those right now. I do also want to mention chloride levels in the river. So we have information on the toe of the saltwater wedge. We get daily at the Sewerage and Water Board and transmit to our partners daily surface chloride levels from Boothville all the way up to our partners in West Jefferson's intakes as well. So we get those levels daily. So we will know well in advance if surface chloride levels or salt levels are expected to rise. Saltwater, I do want to reiterate, has not reached New Orleans. Water in the parish remains safe to drink and use for all purposes. And even if salt levels at the surface do increase on those timelines we talked about, we will continue to produce water and provide water at pressure, and it will always remain safe for the flushing of toilets, bathing, washing clothes, and fire suppression.
Council Chair, I do have a question.
Remember Harris.
Apparently there are some reports, people are thinking that the water tastes salty. Is this just panic setting in?
I can assure you, based on the chloride levels that we monitor in the river as well as coming out of our plant, we are still at our baseline.
Yeah.
So we get between 30 and 50 milligrams per liter of salt in our water all day, all the time, year round. So if folks are tasting salt, it's probably just in our heads at this point. So just remain calm, be calm. Furthermore, Grace has got some tips. Don't go out and panic, buy a bunch of water. You can reuse your containers. If you want to save your milk container and wash it out, fill it up in your sink if that makes you feel better. But what we're going to talk about here are some options to mitigate even having to do that. So I do want to point out what's important when we talk about strategies for West and East Bank, why they are different. West Bank, we produce, and these are averages, about 15 million gallons a day. Our East Bank plant produces on average about 150 milligrams per day. So these are very large differences, which are going to require very different responses. What I want to talk about first, and I want to reiterate that all of our options are still on the table. We haven't ruled anything out. So if a better option comes to the fore in lieu of our front runners for both East or West Bank, we're absolutely going to take those on. But the best overall option for both East and West Bank, and the vehicle is different for these, is blending at our intakes. We've looked at doing blending within the plants, and the logistics of doing that is just far more complicated than being able to blend fresher, less salty water where the pipe comes out of the river. Is there?
Yeah, I just want to get recognized.
So, no, this is that kind of discussion that's important, that's flowing, and I think what this committee is doing is really getting to the meat of it. So please feel free. Councilman Giarrusso.
Thank you. On the previous slide, Steve, it has washing clothes as something that's okay. There's been a lot of discussion, I think, about can you run the salt water? Should you not run the salt water? It will mess up your appliances. It won't mess up your appliances. Are we too early to say where we are in that regard?
We are. That's a really good question, and we will talk about corrosion kind of towards the end of the discussion. But that's one I don't have a good answer for you now.
Yeah, I mean, but that's a good answer. I don't have an answer.
We don't know, but we have been in conversations with Plaquemines and St. Bernard, and God bless them. They've been dealing with this for a number of months. So we do know from them that really high levels, and they peak out at about 1,000 to 1,700 milligrams per liter. That's where they kind of peak out.
Right.
You can start to see effects on hot water heaters, for instance, but we don't know if that's going to be the situation for us. We're tracking fluoride levels. We'll continue to report it. And again, if you have a question or comment or concern or a complaint, please call it into 52 Water, because we are tracking those complaints. And if we start seeing trends, we've already talked about this, we're going to start addressing trends to make sure that we're not potentially missing something.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is we're trying to balance reality with mitigating hysteria.
Yep.
And if, you know, you're in a land of 750 parts per million, that's a lot different than 1,500.
That's right.
And I just think we have to explain publicly and easily.
And I think it also, there's an unknown of how long the exposure is.
That's correct.
To the appliances, to the piping.
Right.
You know, if we're, you know, Plaquemines potentially by the end of this could be in it for 6 or 8 months, whereas we might, hopefully with the pipeline not in it at all, but if we are, it'd be a much shorter period of time.
Thank you.
And Louisiana Department of Health has got some great resources out there on chloride levels. My understanding is the 250 milligrams per liter is a health advisory level. It doesn't mean that it's suddenly a cutoff. It's unsafe. It's a sliding scale. What I'm told is it's probably not even, you can't really taste it until it gets to about 350. Milk has 500 milligrams per liter of salt in it. So these are all things to just bear in mind and consider. As far as possible, getting back to the possible solutions, the first thing we did look at that's not on the presentation is raising our intakes, if that would be helpful, because as we've talked about, the salt water is heavier, it stays towards the bottom of the river and then mixes as the wedge moves up. The good news is our intakes are already taking off the top 3 to 10 feet of the river, and the river is between 100 and 200 feet deep out from our intakes. So there's really not much benefit from us at this point to raise our intakes. They're already pulling off the freshest part of the river. So that's good. Blending is, as I mentioned before, the best solution for us at this point. The question is, how would we blend? We have looked at desalination and reverse osmosis. And doing that with barges in the river. That does remain a potential option for us at our West Bank plant, because as we noted before, at about 15 million gallons per day, there is enough capacity available for us to have to do that as a backup option. I do also want to note that when we talk about blending, we don't need to fully replace every gallon from the river that goes in. We just need to be able to mix enough to where we get down as close to our baseline or below that 250 as possible. So that's good. We don't have to have a full replacement of what goes into our intakes. Next slide. We've looked at alternate water sources. We have and are considering wells. That has not been ruled out. I am told that there is the potential to produce that amount of water, but we've been advised by LDH and others that we don't have a really good understanding of what the chemistry of that water looks like. Our master plan from 1992 did explore the use of wells and aquifers as an alternate water source. And what it found is there are a number of different lenses below us, ranging from 200 to 1,500 feet. And those lenses could also contain elevated levels of salt, as well as, you know, having an off color or a sulfur odor. So it's not off the table, but it's also potentially something that would not be a good option in terms of that corrosion discussion that we're having. We have also talked about connecting to other systems. We've been in discussions since the beginning with Jefferson Parish. And the issue is they're looking to have the same situation we are, and they don't have the additional capacity for us to be able to take from them. So we're working on a regional approach to supply water that would do so for both parishes, but connecting into their system really isn't a great option for us at this point. I'd like to go to the next slide and look at the next steps for the West Bank. Again, dilution is the best option. And the West Bank is a lot easier from an engineering standpoint, because they only need at most, or on average at most, at 1,500 million gallons per day. And the Army Corps assures us that they will be able to develop the barging capacity to be able to bring that in from upriver and discharge that into our inlets. We are currently working on designs. We have an engineer on board who is working on the proper infrastructure to be in place in time to receive that barged water in time for October 22nd. So that is already underway. We did talk about, I alluded to reverse osmosis. If something should happen and we should not be able to barge, RO is a potential option. We have some pricing on that as well. So I just want to assure our customers, again, the water remains safe to drink, and we're working on mitigation strategies to keep it that way. Talking about the East Bank, and I also wanted to mention the West Bank. The formal request was submitted on September 21st. Our formal request to GOSEP went in on Friday, the 22nd. So that request has already been made. And I do want to stress that we're talking about longer term options. We want to do as much in a permanent fashion as we can. So while there are options, now barging isn't an option for the East Bank, but one of the potentials is a large vessel. So they make ships that carry molasses or concentrated juice or other things. You can't really use an oil tanker because the residue would of course create a problem by pumping that into our intakes. But they do have other ships of a large size. We are considering that as an outside option, and there are discussions about that ongoing. But the most viable option that we have at this point is to be able to put an intake upriver from our Carrollton intakes. We've been advised by the Army Corps that there is a large hydrogeologic feature at the bottom of the river at or around Kenner that will stall or stop this saltwater wedge. So that makes a natural ultimate stopping point for us. So to be able to end up with an intake at that location and pump and pipe that downstream into our intakes, and as well as Jefferson Parish's, does remain our most viable option. To answer Council Member Harris's question, we have not started construction yet, and the reason being, this is an immense cost. It comes at a very high capital cost, greater than we at the Sewerage and Water Board would have the authority to pull the trigger on. With that said, we have been in conversations with contracting groups that assure us they are able to get this infrastructure in place. So we have everything ready. And again, I want to stress how hard the federal, state, and local government has been leading forward. So we really appreciate their support in this.
I mean, $20 million, $100 million?
The request at this point is well north of $100 million. We put in a request between $100 and $250 million.
Well, I'm all for docking that largest pay. We'll start there.
This
That's
is,
a joke.
Well, I'm sorry.
I said I'm all for docking that largest pay. They're not here.
no
So
doubt
whatever
about
we
it.
can do.
This is of national and international interest also.
Yes, and that's where, well, just very quickly, I do want to stress that any option we take on, we're looking at as permanent a set of measures as possible, and we want to be sure that we're providing regional benefit. Because this, and we also want to look at being able to do this in a stepwise fashion so that, God willing, it rains in Ohio next week. We haven't bitten everything off, and we're going to start at our intakes at Carrollton and move upstream so that we can stay ahead of that salinity. So that,
And I think if I'll stay in my lane, but one of the discussions we've had is that, and this is regards to, can this be done by October 28th, 29th, but by November 1st, we'd say. Having the ability to start the pipe at Carrollton, pause at East Bank Jefferson Parish and hook them into it, and then continue further upriver. We can kind of do, for lack of a better term, off ramps all the way up to start drawing water into this immediately, which I think would benefit the schedule on this. Ultimately, the end of this would be near Kenner, near River Mile 120, 115 to 120 area.
and I do
That's-
want to.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no,
I'm sorry.
please, that's it.
I also want to add, this is a fluid situation. So the configuration, no pun intended, I'm sorry. The configurations, how things end up, where they line up, we haven't answered those questions yet, but I do want to assure everyone, we've been in very consistent and regular contact with Jefferson Parish, and we want to be sure that we're doing everything that we can in lockstep with them to provide maximum regional benefit.
Council Chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I assume you're seeking federal funding for this, right?
Absolutely.
Because it is a regional issue. It's a Louisiana issue. And then my other question is testing. So I assume that you test at the intake daily. Can you talk a little bit about that so people can be assured that the water will continue to be tested and reported out as safe or unsafe?
Yeah, so Ron, did you have anything else? I didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah,
I will address that shortly.
And he's addressed, I just wanted to comment on, because what makes me a little nervous at night, money. And then hence the reason why we are lockstep as a regional partner with the 4 parishes, as well as the state and the federal government. Because as Steve and everyone indicated, the more we look into solutions relative to piping for the region, the costs are very expensive. As Steve indicated, that 100 million, these costs could go north of $250+ million. I just want to reiterate that this is a huge issue we're dealing with. And that's why we are pretty much in lockstep with the state and the federal government. The state did submit an application for a federal declaration, and that's under review at this point in time, because this is the only way we can resolve these solutions.
Councilmember Harris's question, frequency of testing is important.
Yes, so the next slide relates to corrosion control, and a huge part of that is testing right now, because as we alluded to, there are a lot of things that we don't know the answers to. We don't know how high the concentrations will get. We don't know how long they will last. We have some idea based on what our partners down the river are seeing, but we are testing salt levels in the river and in our plant as we head out to the city on a daily basis. So we know what the chloride, the salt concentrations are in the river and in our system each and every day. And we are reporting that within our group as well. In addition to that, we perform a full battery of tests and have for many years on the water that enters our system. We're looking at things like pH, alkalinity, other constituents, and we're reporting that to LDH as well as EPA. Because one of the questions we have is corrosion within our system, not just on appliances, but also on lead service lines, of which we do have a large number within our system. So we want to be sure that if there is a problem or any concern, that we are able to identify that as soon as humanly possible and communicate that to our customers. And that happens through testing.
Yeah, so on the communication piece, Steve, I don't want to insult y'all, but you're not the best communicators at Sewer and Water Board. So I assume, Colin, that NOLA Ready will also be at the ready to text message, email, talk to the press about if we get to a level that is unsafe.
Yes, ma'am. And in fact, as I mentioned about how regional this is, we've set up a regional joint information center. Grace from Sewage and Water Board has just been terrific with us, as well as all the partners from the other parishes, from the state and from the Corps. Anna Wynn, my communications director for NOLA Ready, can kind of go into detail about when the presentation's up or now. But yes, absolutely. We're really treating this, I think, even above and beyond what we've done in the past with other parishes, as far as assisting with communications. It's going to be critical in this. I think it's going to be, other than fixing the problem, it's the number one priority that we have right now, is keeping the public informed.
And listen, I've said this before in other instances, especially when Entergy offers a program. It's fine. Like, I get text messages all the time. I'm on social media all the time, but I really do worry about our elderly folks who aren't as tech savvy, who aren't as tuned in. What is the plan for communicating with them?
Direct outreach. And that's what it's always been. You know, we're good at that because of, when we do hurricane preparedness, I know I've sat here for budget and other things and said that it was great, during COVID, to be able to leverage things like Zoom and Teams and things to have these types of meetings. But we know that that's not our target audience for the most part. It's always about direct outreach, face to face, and it will always be about that. So that will be the plan. We've already done, I think, 2 or 3 town halls. We've coordinated with you on another town hall right now, and that is to tamp down, and Councilmember King, to tamp down any type of panic, because right now it is just panic. There is absolutely no reason. This is not doomsday. The water is going to flow. We're going to get people the water they need, should there be a need for bottled water. But for right now, it is about the communications of the public.
And it'll be addressed at the senior caucus. This week, it'll be an item, especially of urgency, to explain to our seniors and let them know.
And I would add too that we're currently activated in the Emergency Operations Center. We have a planning cell going on right now that is dealing with the logistics and the planning and the distribution of water, particularly to vulnerable populations. And I'm speaking specifically about seniors, the unhoused, and those with compromised medical situations that are maybe not able to get to the store to get water. We're targeting that as our number one priority in any water distribution plan.
Mr. Spooner, to wrap up your part. of the
One thing very
presentation.
quickly, Grace will take the last two slides for us.
Okay.
There was a question about what,
I'm sorry. Before we get off
Councilmember
this,
Jeruso.
sorry. So we said this is between 100 to $250 million. Just a couple things. Number one, are the feds going to give the region that money, or is this going to be like a reimbursable sort of emergency preparedness thing like we deal with hurricanes? Do we know yet?
I'm hearing right now that the president of the United States has signed the federal declaration.
All right.
Well, I think that's why the governor and the mayor's declarations were important. That would go in line with what should be done.
I
But-
agree.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean what's always done.
So in our discussions with the state and FEMA, they don't see an issue with this. And I'll be very careful about saying they don't see an issue with this. The state has indicated that they understand that they'll assume some risk on the front end with the cost. Just to get mobilized, because it is a huge mobilization cost to do a project like this and have it done within, say, 30 days. But obviously, we would be seeking Stafford Act type reimbursement, probably 75% of whatever is spent. And if that goes back directly to the state, if the city or the parish or Jefferson Parish go in on that, we'll figure that out. But for right now, we feel like we're in a good place with both the state and the federal government that this is going to happen.
Yeah, I guess when you're talking of money of that magnitude, we just want to make sure that we're equipped and that money is not the problem for progress.
Money's not the problem. In fact, Sewage and Water Board has indicated they're going to support I think at the technical and engineering side of the plan, which I think makes sense because they're going to project manage it and own it essentially. And I think that will be another opportunity to work with Jefferson Parish and their water district and on the East Bank to make sure that this works. We've looked at everything. We've looked at, permanent pipe. We've looked at hose. We've looked at all sorts of different options on how to get the water downriver.
And that's, just want to comment on that. The Sewage and Water Board, we've brought on since late last week, engineering consultant, we were entering into an emergency contract, design contract. So we do have the funds to support our design contract on this emergency basis. And as Colin indicated, we are working pretty much lockstep with Jefferson Parish. We have a meeting with their technical team this afternoon to discuss not just the piping option on the East Bank, but they're looking into this on the West Bank. And Councilman Jeruso, that dollar range we gave you is just for the East Bank. It's not the West Bank. So again, from a regional perspective, when you include the West Bank, that cost is going to go higher.
And Jefferson Parish has a more substantial water plant on the West Bank than we do at Algiers. So they are in a situation where, they're 40, 50 million gallons a day on the West Bank. So this pipeline solution is something that they will be looking at for their West Bank as well.
I mean, their water plant may be more substantial, but we have to remember after Katrina, it was the Algiers plant, once we got it back up and running, that actually created potable water for the whole region. Their system wasn't running. So Councilman Jeruso, they relied on New Orleans.
And we're doing that now with Jefferson Parish, with Plaquemines and St. Bernard. They've reestablished a connection near Jackson Barracks, so Orleans water can go to St. Bernard Parish while they're still out of this, but it isn't starting to move up into their area. The only thing I would caution about that time frame is that, we had a much less people in the city at that time. With full population, obviously, we have to, these are the types of solutions we have to come up with because the demand is not going to be less.
A couple questions. There's a term called brackish water that outdoorsmen folk use in this area. We also know there are a lot of indigenous species that kind of go back and forth between saltwater and freshwater here. Can we use brackish water and for how long, especially given that it's not new to the region and there are species that actually have learned how to live with and live in both?
well, I think, great question. And I believe the answer to that is probably best fielded by LDH. They've got a lot of good information on salinity and salt levels and the populations that would have to be concerned about it. For you and I, 250 milligrams per liter, probably not a big issue for us. But there are folks that need to be cognizant of it, and LTH has got some really good info on that.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember, I did ask about drawing from the lake. It appears the salt content is too high.
Right,
That's correct.
okay, all right. Colonel, anything you want to add, especially in terms of brackish water, its impact
Once
on our
again-
systems and national security issues?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, Councilman. First off, once again, I would refer to LDH in regard
Okay.
to the salinity requirements based off health requirements. I'm going to tell you that we are in both direct assistance and technical assistance for the Sewage and Water Board. As you heard from Steve, they were going to be incorporated into our large scale water barging plan on the Mississippi River, where we are aiming to be able to provide up to 14 million gallons per day to their location. As such, I know that they are busily working on developing a reservoir barge system at their intake sites at Algiers so they can receive that water in a timely fashion. And at the same time, working with them in regards to their water intake plans going north of Kenner as well. And then the other aspect that we're looking to support is through rapid permitting and permissions so they can execute this plan in a timely fashion. So we're also going to have technical assistance out there with them at their Jefferson meeting this afternoon, and we'll continue to be with them step in step.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? We have one speaker and we will go to online comments after that. Mr. Morgan? Mr. Morgan? Yeah. And I apologize if Mr. Lynch is still here. He wanted to speak on item number 4. Is Mr. Lynch still here? We'll take that up before we adjourn, Mr. Lynch. I apologize for that. Mr. Morgan?
Yeah. So Councilman, I'm sorry. We
Yeah.
actually have another presentation as well. We have more to share if you'd like from
Oh,
NOSEP and from Sewage and Water.
Okay, Ms. Morgan, you want to wait until she finishes her part, or you want to make your comments now? Okay, all right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Grace Birch, the Acting Director of Communications at the Sewage and Water Board. I did want to address the communications aspect. On our website is a banner that has a saltwater wedge update page. So many good resources on that page from the state and the city. And that page will transition during the event to a communications hub where we will communicate those testing results. As Steve said, testing and communication is so important. The communications is really being collaborated on all levels with all our agencies. We can't thank our partners and even this council enough for getting those key messages out to the public that saltwater has not reached Orleans Parish. And we will continue to deliver water to the citizens no matter the salinity level. So how can customers prepare, remain calm, and store extra drinking water from the tap in reusable containers? Conservation practices are going to be important when the event arrives. For every gallon of water, Steve says that we don't use is a gallon less that we have to use for blending. And of course, the NOLA Ready partners and our partners at the State Office of Emergency are going to be imperative during this. If there's one thing that South Louisiana does really well, it is emergency communications and response. So thank you, council members.
Council Chair,
Harris.
I do, again, I want to go back to the conservation part of this. Stephen, maybe you can talk more about it. At some point, I don't know, what, a week out of the event, will there be a communication on how to properly conserve water? Because we're not LA, we are LA, but we're not LA, so we don't know how to conserve water.
Yes, absolutely. Great question. I just want to assure everybody, if you want to conserve water, it's always a good time to do that. But the amount of water that's flowing down the Mississippi, 24 hours worth of our supply flows by our intakes every 1.5 seconds. So there's plenty of fresh water now, but you're absolutely correct. The timeline that we have towards the end of October, as we approach that timeline, we will have communications out for our customers about specific things that we can do to conserve water, because Grace is correct. Every gallon at that point where, if and when we have to dilute, every gallon I don't have to dilute is a gallon that I don't have to borrow.
And it can be as basic as turning off the water when you brush your teeth, taking shorter showers,
That's correct.
not running irrigation systems.
I've got a leaky toilet that I've got.
So,
Right, that's, yeah,
Councilmember, our goal is to actually start notifying the public 2 weeks out from impacts when we have a better idea from the National Weather Service of when the intrusion will impact Orleans and Jefferson. And so Grace has actually been working with LDH to put together those conservation tips for our neighbors in Plaquemines Parish and St. Bernard. And so we are preparing that information to put out. We're just not necessarily ready to share that with Orleans and Jefferson until about 2 weeks out, because we don't want to cause a panic and have people start thinking they have to hoard water. Because I do want to make it clear that purchasing water bottles is not water conservation. Water conservation is.
That's good for water suppliers and retailers
Yes.
and markups on how much their water costs us now because of the panic.
Yeah, so water conservation is storing water, rainwater, or storing tap water for use later. It is not purchasing bottles of water. I want to make it clear that if you are purchasing and hoarding water in Orleans or Jefferson, you are hurting our neighbors in Plaquemines and St. Bernard, because they do not have water available. And so when they try to go to New Orleans or Metairie to buy water and there's no water in stock, that means they have to go even further to look for water. And so we're really asking the public to not hoard water, because it is impacting in the short term our neighbors in Plaquemines and St. Bernard.
no, I appreciate that, but I also do think there's something to be said about getting in the habit of something. So the sooner that you can share those conservation tips, not to cause a panic, but really just to get people in the rhythm of, okay, this is what I need to do as a best practice generally.
I think that's a great point. And I think that Grace and I will chat some more, and what we'll do is be sure to share this with, you and the other council members and other elected officials have been really incredibly helpful in helping to reinforce our message. And so what we will likely do is share this in advance with you all and just put a disclaimer about, again, not hoarding water and just trying to instill that calm that we really need right now.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. just wanna
Yeah,
add
no,
one more question.
absolutely.
Did we actually get a roundabout date when the piping work would begin? That was Councilmember Harris's question. I want to be very clear, but I know there's hoops and procedures and nobody's sure about the engineering, but like 3 days from now, 8 days from now?
As soon as humanly possible, but what I can't do is commit us to that level of financial impact without having some sort of
Right.
notification.
Okay.
I think the announcement that the presidential declaration has been signed is going to move this into hyperdrive and government speak, as
Okay.
far as, within a week, I think is a realistic,
Okay.
Yeah,
we're in the managing expectations
Correct.
business here, and I think it's a very fair question. And again, to the extent we can help, I don't have a direct line to the president, but there are
You
a
don't?
lot, no, but there are others that we collectively can help facilitate, and we want to help do
No,
our part
absolutely.
to help you.
And what I would ask is when we do start a lot of the messaging, particularly around conservation, we've been looking at Cape Town in 2018. They had a pretty
Mhm.
significant drought that brought them almost out of water for different reasons. But it was drought related, and they went on a very strict conservation plan, and they've managed to actually continue a lot of that to this day. So I mean, I think there is opportunity there to really maybe kind of change the way we use water as well, which will help in the future with water scarcity and some of the things that we are going to have to look out for in the future.
Okay, yeah, I mean, my staff just handed me, thank you, Amy, like the declaration's out. And
Yes.
so it says emergency protective measures.
I didn't want to
Including-
overspeak before it actually
I know, well, I don't blame you, but we got it now, so.
ding on the
It's
phone.
Right, it's live, and I think to Council Member Thomas's point, federal government, state government, city, all aligns in trying to unlock these resources as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Lastly, before Mr. Morgan speaks, Colin, Mr. Homeland Security and Colonel, this week is my restaurant run. There's several restaurants I want to go to and enjoy. I want to go to the Fried Chicken Festival. I have my friends who want to do staycations at the hotels. Is it okay for us to continue with our plans?
Absolutely.
Okay,
So, Mr. Council President.
Yes.
We actually would love to also share some updates from the NOSEP, and if you'd like,
Please.
we can open it up to questions.
okay. Okay.
Grace, can you pull up that slide deck for us? Thank you.
This is your deck, right?
Yes. So I'll let Colin take it away. for us.
Colin?
So we've gone over this, we issued the city's declaration last Friday. A lot of this has already been discussed today. Next slide. We are activated upstairs. Like I said, our primary mission right now, thank you, is developing a plan for water distribution, particularly with the vulnerable populations in the city. Next slide. We're going to have informational sessions with the state delegation, our federal delegation, and the business community. We're reaching out to a lot of the grocery and retailers right now to talk about their plans, to talk about how much water they're bringing in, to talk about the panic buying and some of the pricing issues that we've heard a little bit about. And we want to make sure Jefferson Parish is doing the same thing with their retailers. Again, mutual aid to Plaquemines and St. Bernard. We're going to be sending volunteers down there to help with water distribution. The communication piece obviously is something that we have the ability to share with our counterparts in Plaquemines and St. Bernard Parish. And of course, Sewage and Water Board has been working with both parishes to provide them extra water where we can. Next slide. Oh, yeah, I'll go ahead, Anna.
Thank you again. So, as you know, my name is Anna Nguyen. I oversee NOLA Ready. I've also been spearheading the coordination effort for the Region 1 Joint Information Center. And so for folks who are not familiar with the concept of a Joint Information Center, this is something that happens often with emergencies where all agencies involved in messaging get together and coordinate with one voice, because we fully understand that this is a very scary situation for people, especially with a lot of the uncertainty that's out there. And so it's our mission to make sure that we're putting out information in a transparent and responsible manner, so that, anything that we put out, we want to make sure that folks understand that we still have at least 1 month out. And I say at least because there are a lot of measures that are taking place every day that could potentially push back that timeline. There could be potentially rain that helps us to push back that timeline. We just don't know because it's too far out, but we have at least 1 month. And that's a lot of time for us to gather the information needed. So we have been having daily calls with the Joint Information Center, the Region 1 JIC, which we are calling right now the Southeast Louisiana JIC, with Sewage and Water Board involved, Jefferson Parish, GOSEP, LDH, the Army Corps, St. Bernard and Plaquemines. I talk to all these agencies every morning. I talk to all these agencies at least 3 or 4 times a day since this situation developed. And so again, our priority is speaking with one voice as one region, because Plaquemines and St. Bernard do not have the same capacity in terms of communications as New Orleans or Jefferson does. And so we're really trying to do this as a region so that we can make sure that we're giving information to everyone and anyone who needs it. All public information is going to be centralized on emergency.la.gov. We're working very closely with GOSEP to make sure that any New Orleans updates are going to be both on NOLA Ready's website, but also centralized on Jefferson Parish. This is particularly for people who are just curious about the situation. They have the same questions that you all are having and that the public are having about, can I wash my clothes? Can I take a bath? Things like that. And so all that information is being compiled and put together for the state's website. Again, anything that's relevant to New Orleans will also be on the NOLA Ready webpage. I'm also working with ITI to make sure that we have kind of an overview of what is a saltwater intrusion, what are some of the common questions, because we are fully aware that a lot of people will be coming to NOLA Ready first. And so I just want to, again, reinforce that these are the 2 places that you all can send constituents, that you all can check. If you check right now, it's not fully fleshed out, but it will be especially by Friday, we'll have a lot more of the FAQs. Next slide, please. So again, I want to say that we really want to thank you all for really to help reinforce this message. We also want to thank our media partners for really reinforcing this message. The water is still safe in New Orleans and Jefferson Parish and St. Bernard Parish. The timeline currently forecasts New Orleans may be impacted. And again, I want to stress that that's just an estimate. We don't know for sure until about 2 weeks out when we have the National Weather Services forecast. Should New Orleans or Jefferson experience saltwater impacts, especially because both parishes will be impacted essentially at the same time. We're working in lockstep with Jefferson Parish so that all this information is ready to go and available to the public in all the parishes. And so the public will be notified well in advance of any changes that should be made to their water usage. And then lastly, our priority right now is helping out St. Bernard and Plaquemines Parish. As you've heard, we really are looking at all the options of how to mitigate this for Orleans and Jefferson. But if folks are antsy, which I fully understand why, you've just been told that this thing is happening, that you as the public can't do anything about it except for wait for information. I fully understand that that causes a lot of anxiety as a person who has a lot of anxiety. And so, like Colin mentioned, we're exploring ways on how we can directly help Plaquemines and St. Bernard right now. And should the need come where we need to set up our own water distribution sites in New Orleans, we will bring that effort back to New Orleans. But over the coming days, we hope to be able to share information to you all, to push out to constituents about how they can help now, and to give people something to do and to feel like they're contributing, because it will help. Again, St. Bernard and Plaquemines do not have the same amount of capacity. And so we're trying to do everything we can, messaging wise, information wise, translations wise. I've been in conversations with LSU Ag Center, as well as the Department of Agriculture and Forestry about tips about livestock. Do I need to know about cows? No, but it is very helpful for Plaquemines Parish and St. Bernard in seeking out that information and packaging it. Next slide. So next steps, just for your awareness, this is not something that NOLA Ready is doing. This is a part of the Region 1 JIC effort. The Louisiana Department of Health has been is working right now on putting together a series of frequently asked questions for the public. The first and foremost that they're working on putting out is information about WIC and ready to feed formula for pregnant women or women or people with small infants. They're also working on putting together the FAQs for hospitals and healthcare providers. So we just talked with them this morning, and those two are very much the priority right now, and they're in their final stage of development. But there's also going to be several other FAQs over the coming days, including just for the general public, around pets and livestock, and around vulnerable populations. We're also, again, like I mentioned earlier, compiling some water, thanks to Grace at Sewage and Water Board, compiling tips around water conservation, which again will be shared with you all and with the public when we feel like it's a good time to start doing that. But definitely taking note about maybe sharing it sooner. We'll have that discussion with the JIC. And that's all I have for right now. This is very much our top priority to make sure this is as transparent as possible. We all know what it's like to go through something as uncertain as a hurricane. This is a new uncertain, and we're going to make sure that we give you whatever information you need to talk to the public and have to continue running the city while we work through the situation.
Comment, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Morgan, thank you for allowing them to finish their presentation.
Morning to everybody in the house. My name is Larry Morgan. I represent South, East, West, and North of NOLA. I had a meeting, people coming to my house in the last 2 days concerning this crisis of the salt water and the corrosion. And what they fear that in the salt water issue, that the water will become a commodity that will cause price gouging. They're afraid that stove will go up on the water, like Family Dollar. They constantly mention Family Dollar, Dollar General, the filling station, and also the store that the Vietnamese people run also. They will go up on their water using that opportunity to price gouge. Just like when a catastrophic storm comes through here, what happened? Lowe's, Home Depot, they all go up on their products and then a couple of months after, they drop their price. We ask y'all to take that matter into consideration and beat the iron while it's hot. And also they ask that they know that the washing machines is going to be affected, damaged to a certain degree. And I tell them, I explain to them, I say, well, most pipes today, they have the plastic pipe. And I told them, I said, that I don't believe that the salt water can do much damage to that because the surface inside the plastic pipes are smooth and they are treated. But the galvanized pipe, they are prone to corrosion. I said, that's where your problem come in at. Well, then they said, Mr. Morgan, they said, if the problem happened, who are responsible for that? I told them, I said, well, guess what I have always noticed? Every year, the government pumps in millions of dollars to community and to our city for research problems in the future. And when those scenario comes up, our leaders, our councilmen and Baton Rouge should have the answer. And they say, well, Mr. Morgan, why they don't have the answer now? I say, because the reason is that they are known to get money for projects and let it sit there. And when nobody open their mouth, they use it in other projects.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
And I told him, I said, that's what happened. And also one more scenario there, Miss Ann asked me to put across.
Okay.
Miss Ann said, Mr. Morgan, I said, what? She said, do you remember the man that gave himself the $54,000 red Corvette Suja water bowl? For that price there, he should come up with the answer that Suja or that salt water in that corrosion because he getting paid a price that no other official in the city of New Orleans has ever gotten, not even a councilman in New Orleans. So
Thank you, Mr. Morgan, and tell Miss Ann, thank you too. Thank you. Councilmember Green.
I'd like to thank you all for your presentations. It's very valuable information, and I've shared links and websites and the numbers for people to call on, not to call, but to go online to see. Mr. Morgan did actually mention something that I wanted to mention without going into detail, but I do want to remind retailers, especially small business owners, that there are Louisiana laws against price gouging. And I've been seeing some signs online that people have been publishing that suggest that I just want retailers to recognize and understand the law, go to Louisiana law, look up Louisiana law regarding price gouging, because we don't want to have issues involving businesses being shut down at this time. And it's also important to recognize that water is a necessity for all people. And this would be the worst way for someone to get into the news, and that would be based on price gouging on water. So just keep that in mind. But I'm saying that to retailers who are watching and to people who might go into a store and say, look, you need to be aware of Louisiana law. I've seen it already. I also want to just say that I appreciate everyone saying and emphasizing, and I appreciate this meeting, that there is no reason to panic. And also this meeting says a lot is being done on a local, federal, and state level and on a regional level. And sometimes based on where we are now, it's okay to applaud what is being done. I applaud the fact that the state, I attended a meeting at the convention center the other day with 70 people sitting at the table, state, local, and federal officials, Sewage and Water Board, the City of New Orleans, Office of Emergency Preparedness, the Army Corps of Engineers. So thank you for the work that we're doing to let the public know that we're out there working and that this is not a time to panic. It's a time to recognize that a lot of public good is being done. Thank you for your work.
Mr. Spooner, before we close out, rapid fire, yes or no? Water safe?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Food safe?
Yes, sir.
Washing my clothes safe?
Yes, sir.
And go to restaurants.
Restaurants safe?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hotels safe?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Last word, Mr. Spooner?
First of all, I'd like to thank the council for inviting us up so we can give our our update on the saltwater improvement. So again, as you can see, it is a regional approach with our partners, and the partners here is the local, and I would say the federal level with the Corps of Engineers. We're also working with Jefferson Parish and St. Bernard. So again, thank the public, thank the council for bringing us up here, and as communication experts, Grace on one side and Anna, as information come out, they will release that updated information to the public as soon as we get it.
Thank you all very much, and also thank our media partners. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any online comments? I want to apologize to Mr. Lynch. He wanted to speak on item 4. So colleagues, before we adjourn, if we would give him a chance to do that. And please forgive me, Mr. Lynch. I had put it in the water pile. Mr. Rob Lynch.
Rob Lynch, I'm with Bike Taxi, one of the pedicab companies here at 631 Elysian Fields. My comments were pertaining to item number 4, which was the Ground Transportation Bureau discussion. Ground Transportation Bureau obviously having some enforcement issues that were discussed. And I understand that you guys may be trying to move them into a different committee or under someone else's control. I would recommend that steps be taken to give some teeth to the organization as far as enforcement goes. There's going to, if you go to the Beyonce concert tonight, there's going to be 15 to 20 golf carts out there operating as for-hire vehicles. They're not going to have license plates. They're not going to have insurance, but they're competing directly with taxis, pedicabs, et cetera. I know that under Chapter 90, there already is a regulation that allows for the deputizing of government employees to issue municipal tickets, because right now the ground transportation has no one to issue municipal tickets. They work with no one to issue municipal tickets. They have in the past, but this is an issue that's been going on for several years. And I understand that there is going to be some transition in the department. And I was just hoping that that be taken into consideration going forward.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. And again, I apologize
That's no
that they
problem.
weren't here.
I mean,
Before we,
Councilmember Thomas.
Councilmember Jerusalem.
Yeah, just to your point, I mean, we're at a public forum right now. If people aren't operating correctly, then our hope is the
They'll be out
enforcement.
there.
Yeah, and that you've raised this
Absolutely.
issue for us, and that, look, we're gonna ask just like you. And
Sure.
please keep bringing it to our attention for people.
Sure,
who
I can
operate.
tell you what happened. It's been happening for years. We tell the
Yeah.
Ground Transportation Bureau, they tell us to tell the police tell us to tell the Ground Transportation Bureau. That's how it's been.
And that's why the conversation earlier is important about where do we place that issue?
Correct. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention, and like we can send you, I believe we have been sending you all emails of it. Of actual pictures of it, videos of them charging people. So it's not just they're out there operating, giving free rides. They're charging people. They're coming up behind our drivers, undercutting them, et cetera.
Before we adjourn, and thank you, Mr. Lynch, to my colleagues, very good meeting. I think we got to the heart of the issues, the questions that people were asking. And I think we had the right people here to answer those questions. And I'm so proud of my colleagues for the questions and the focus, because I think it got us to where we are now, but also how do we take a look at the future? This issue is going to continue to happen, especially given our climate and what's happening in the world today. To our staff, I would like us to have one of the agenda items for the next meeting. I saw Mr. Torrey here earlier. I want to focus on garbage collection contracts, where they are. I'm hearing that the DBE requirements and those contracts have not been met or have been averted. So I'd like them to focus on this one-a-day pickup, the number of complaints, and what is the status of DBE compliance within those contracts, especially since they're double what they were when 2 minority contractors were the primes. We need to know, we need to have answers to those questions. Mr. Councilman Harris, Councilman Jerusalem.
No, I agree. I think we also need to talk about additional structures in the encampments so people who are living there can actually properly dispose of their trash.
Absolutely,
We've been talking offline with Mr. Torrey about it, but I do think we need to raise that back up.
absolutely.
So I look forward to it.
We can have that as an agenda item as along with the sanitation. Councilmember Green.
Just since that issue was brought up, I think it's a good issue. I was at an encampment cleanup today on Claiborne Avenue, and the Department of Sanitation, the Health Department, the New Orleans Police Department, they were there doing that cleanup. And while they were there at that cleanup, they noticed someone who was in physical distress. And they were able to get her to the hospital. She was not going to the hospital. She was in her tent. Her arm, part of it was gangrene. At the end of the day, we recognize some of the challenges that exist in these encampments are that you don't have access to the information or to the people as you should. But today, a significant cleanup took place and it resulted in someone being saved, potentially from much more serious harm that would take place if they had not gotten to the hospital today. So just want to emphasize that, the importance of those cleanups.
Thank you. The chair moves for adjournment. Second by the chorus. And I'm not a lead singer. All in favor? Aye, aye, aye. Oh, man.